When Sarah opened her front door to find her younger sister Emily standing there with two worn suitcases and a look that tried to hide how defeated she felt. The moment Sarah saw her, everything inside her shifted, like someone had turned the volume down on the whole world. Emily had always walked through life with bright energy, but now her shoulders drooped and her smile didn't reach her eyes. She apologized for coming so suddenly, but Sarah didn't let her finish. She hugged her tightly and pulled her inside as if she'd been waiting at the door all morning. Daniel, Sarah's husband, appeared a second later, calm and steady as always, giving Emily a warm greeting before taking the suitcases without hesitation. He didn't ask for details or explanations, simply made space for her, the way he always did for people who needed it. Sarah felt a wave of gratitude for that, but underneath it was a small knot of worry she couldn't quite name. Emily had left her apartment after a sudden breakup. And although she hadn't shared everything yet, Sarah could tell she wasn't just homeless, she was heartbroken. The kind of heartbreak that made people lose trust in themselves, in their choices, in what their future looked like. As they showed her the guest room, Emily kept insisting she wouldn't stay long, that she didn't want to intrude on their married life. But Sarah kept brushing it off, telling her this was her home for as long as she needed. Still, as Emily's things were placed neatly in the room, and Daniel quietly made sure she had clean sheets and a glass of water by the nightstand, Sarah watched them both and felt something she didn't want to admit. Fear of how this new living arrangement might change the balance in their home. Not because she didn't trust her sister or her husband, but because life had a way of shifting when new emotions entered a space, and she could already feel change humming under the surface. At dinner that night, Emily tried to act upbeat, telling light stories about her job and pretending her life wasn't falling apart. But there were moments when her voice thinned out, and Sarah saw Daniel glance at her with quiet concern. Sarah noticed everything. The way Emily seemed to relax a little when Daniel reassured her that she wasn't a burden. The way Daniel pulled out her chair without thinking. The way they both tried so hard to hide their sadness from each other. It wasn't romantic, it was human. But sometimes human moments carried their own weight. When the dishes were washed and Emily finally went to bed, Sarah stood in the hallway looking at the closed guest room door. Feeling a mix of love and anxiety, she wanted to protect her sister with everything she had, but she also wanted to protect the peaceful rhythm of her marriage. She knew Daniel loved her deeply, yet she couldn't escape the quiet worry that inviting someone so emotionally fragile into their home might stir feelings none of them intended. As she walked back toward the living room, she caught Daniel adjusting the blanket on the couch, making it neat for the morning. He looked up at her with that familiar grounding smile, and for a moment her worry faded. Still, the truth was already settling into the walls of their home. Emily moving in wasn't just a temporary stay. It was the start of something none of them fully understood yet, something that would test their hearts in ways quiet and unexpected. And without realizing it, Sarah sensed that the next days would carry more emotion, more closeness, and more change than she had prepared for. Sarah woke up the next morning to the sound of the coffee machine humming, a small comfort in a house that suddenly felt busier than it had the day before. Emily had been moving around quietly, trying not to disturb anyone, but Sarah could hear the soft shuffle of her shoes on the hardwood floor and the occasional sigh that escaped her lips. Daniel, as always, was calm and attentive, pouring coffee for everyone, checking if Emily wanted breakfast, asking about her plans for the day. Sarah appreciated the way he included her sister, but she also felt a flicker of unease in her chest. Watching Daniel offer his attention so naturally to Emily brought a strange mix of relief and something else. Something she didn't quite want to name. Later that morning, Sarah found herself in the kitchen watching Daniel help Emily figure out the Wi-Fi and set up her laptop. They laughed softly at a small technical glitch. And for a moment, Sarah felt an unexpected punch. She realized how easily her sister seemed to fit into the little routines of their home. She reminded herself that Emily needed support, that this was temporary, that Daniel was her husband and loved her for a reason. Still, the pang lingered. When the house quieted down that evening, Sarah took Daniel aside. She had rehearsed her words 100 times in her mind, but spoke simply, her voice steady despite the tiny tremble she felt inside. "I need you to promise me something," she said. Daniel looked at her, eyebrows slightly raised, but his expression was soft, attentive. "Of course," he said immediately. "What is it?" Sarah hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I want you to make sure Emily never feels like she's taking attention from me. She's my sister. She needs to feel welcome. But I don't want us to lose what we have." Daniel reached out and held her hand, and the warmth of it made her chest unclench just slightly. "I understand," he said gently. "You won't lose me. I'll follow your lead. I'll make her feel safe without changing what we have." Sarah felt a rush of gratitude mixed with a sense of relief that she hadn't fully expected. It was simple, she thought, and yet somehow the weight of it lifted some of her worries. She smiled, feeling closer to him in that quiet kitchen than she had all day, though part of her still lingered on what might happen in the days to come. Over the next few days, Emily began to open up more. She shared bits of her heartbreak, fragments of her fears, and stories that made Sarah's heart ache for her. Daniel listened patiently, offering advice only when asked or a small joke to lighten attention, never crossing any boundaries Sarah had set. Every time Sarah saw the way Emily's face softened in his presence, she reminded herself of the promise she had made to trust Daniel to handle this with care, and he did. He remained attentive to her without overshadowing her role as Emily's sister. But Sarah couldn't deny the subtle worry that lingered in her mind. Living together meant emotions would run high, and even the most careful actions could stir feelings in ways no one expected. She caught herself studying Daniel's interactions with Emily, analyzing every gesture, every glance, and realized she was testing him as much as he was supporting her sister. One evening, as Emily talked about trying to find a new job, Sarah noticed Daniel quietly moving around the room, offering a supportive comment here, comforting tone there, always aware of her presence. It struck her how much thought he put into his actions, how much care he had for her feelings. The realization made her chest swell with appreciation and love. She realized that asking him to manage the balance between supporting Emily and keeping their closeness hadn't been just about control. It was about trust. Trust in a man she loved and trust that he could handle what she could not. And as the night grew quiet, Sarah stood by the doorway, watching them talk, listening to the soft laughter and the gentle reassurances, feeling the fragile threads of connection forming between all three of them. She understood then that this was more than a promise. It was a test of love, patience, and understanding. And Daniel was passing it in ways that made her heart ache with gratitude. But even as she smiled softly, she sensed a tension just below the surface, a hint that emotions would continue to shift, that challenges were still ahead, and that their little household would be navigating feelings none of them could fully predict. The weeks after Emily moved in passed in a blur of routines and quiet adjustments, the house fuller than it had been, but also charged with an invisible tension that Sarah couldn't ignore. Emily began to settle, slowly, letting herself relax, though the sadness in her eyes never fully disappeared. Sarah watched as her sister laughed a little more easily over coffee, lingered at the breakfast table, and shared stories about her past relationships and the heartbreak that had brought her here. Daniel remained the anchor, steady and unobtrusive, guiding the household without ever overstepping. He offered small gestures, making sure Emily had snacks she liked, checking if she needed a ride to an interview, quietly adjusting the thermostat to her comfort, but always with a glance at Sarah. A silent reminder that she was his priority. Sarah noticed the subtlety in his behavior, the way he made sure Emily felt safe and seen without ever making her feel like she was intruding, and it filled her with both relief and a strange, protective pride. She had asked him to balance this delicate situation, and he was doing it perfectly. Yet, every day brought new challenges. One rainy afternoon, Emily sank onto the couch, exhausted and frustrated after a phone call that didn't go well. She buried her face in her hands, letting the weight of her fears and insecurities spill out. Sarah hesitated in the hallway, torn between rushing to comfort her sister and respecting the boundaries she and Daniel had set. Daniel, however, appeared beside Emily, almost silently, kneeling in front of her with calm patience. He didn't offer quick fixes or advice. He simply listened, nodded, and allowed her to pour out her worries. His presence was grounding. But Sarah realized the brilliance of it. He was helping Emily without ever undermining Sarah's role or overstepping the trust she had placed in him. Watching him, Sarah felt a rush of emotion she couldn't name, gratitude, love, and a flicker of fear that life could get complicated if feelings weren't carefully managed. Yet, he kept his focus on her sister, offering comfort, but always with measured distance. The way she had asked. That evening, after Emily finally quieted, Sarah found herself sitting alone, reflecting on the past weeks. She realized that the heart of the matter wasn't just about Emily feeling welcome. It was about trust. Trust in her husband, trust in her sister, and trust in herself to navigate the complexities of love and family. Every small laugh, every shared moment, and every tear shed in that living room was building a delicate web of connection. Sarah understood that emotions were unpredictable and even the kindest intentions could stir feelings she hadn't anticipated. She caught herself noticing tiny details. The way Emily's eyes softened when Daniel spoke to her. The way Daniel always turned his attention back to Sarah with a quiet reassurance. The subtle gestures that reminded her she was loved and central. And then there were nights when Sarah lay awake thinking about how fragile this arrangement was, how easy it would be for misunderstandings to creep in if she didn't stay attentive. One evening, she overheard Emily whisper something in the darkness, words of gratitude toward Daniel, and she felt a pang of protectiveness mixed with relief. Daniel's response was soft, consistent, loyal. He reminded her that he was there because of Sarah, because he loved her and respected the promise she had asked of him. That moment crystallized Sarah's feelings. Love wasn't about jealousy or control. It was about trust and partnership, about navigating challenges together without losing sight of what mattered most. She realized that Daniel's care for Emily didn't diminish his love for her. Instead, it amplified the strength of their bond, proving that true connection could endure tests and grow stronger. Yet, even with that clarity, Sarah sensed that the house was filled with emotions she couldn't fully predict, that every day would bring new moments of vulnerability and tenderness, and that the next decision Emily made could shift the balance again. The complexity of their lives was beginning to reveal itself, showing Sarah that love wasn't simple, but it was always worth protecting, nurturing, and trusting, even in the midst of uncertainty and the quiet storm of feelings that filled their home. The night was quiet, the rain tapping softly against the windows as Sarah sat in the living room, watching Emily settle into the couch with a book she wasn't really reading. The air was heavy with unspoken thoughts, the kind that builds slowly when people live under the same roof but carry their own struggles. Sarah could see the tension still lingering in her sister's posture, the way her shoulders tightened when she thought no one was looking, and she felt that familiar tug of protectiveness. Daniel moved around the room quietly, making sure Emily had a blanket and a cup of tea, small gestures that spoke volumes without drawing attention to themselves. Sarah noticed how careful he was. The way he always included Emily in the household without making her feel like she was taking anything from Sarah. It was subtle, almost invisible, yet deeply effective. Later, Emily spoke softly, almost to herself, thanking Daniel for being there, for listening, for helping her feel like she wasn't alone in a house that was suddenly full of complicated feelings. Sarah froze for a moment, realizing the weight of what her husband had been doing all along. Every action, every word, every glance had been in service of the promise she made to protect both her sister and her marriage, to balance kindness with loyalty, to love without losing herself in fear. Daniel's reply was gentle, consistent with the man she had fallen in love with years ago. He reminded Emily that he was there because of Sarah, because he respected the boundaries she had set, because he loved her and wanted to protect the trust between them. Hearing those words made Sarah's chest tighten with relief and gratitude, a warmth that spread through her as she finally allowed herself to acknowledge the depth of her feelings. Later that night, after Emily had gone to bed, Sarah found Daniel on the porch, standing in the rain as if trying to wash away the stress and complexity of the day. She walked up quietly, slipping her hand into his, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath his palm. "You did exactly what I asked," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Daniel turned to her with that same calm warmth, the kind that made her feel seen and safe no matter how chaotic life became. "Of course I did. You're my home, Sarah. And as long as she's here, I'll take care of her the way you would," he said. And the simplicity of it struck her harder than anything else. The promise kept, the love unshaken, the balance maintained. They stood together for a while in the rain, letting the soft drizzle wash over them, feeling connected in a way that words could barely describe. Sarah realized that love wasn't threatened by the presence of someone else's need. It was strengthened by the care and thoughtfulness shown in moments of vulnerability. She understood that Daniel's loyalty wasn't just to her as a wife, but to the family they were creating together, a family that included Emily and the fragile threads of trust and healing she carried. As they returned to the warmth of the house, Sarah felt a quiet certainty settle in her heart. Their home was no longer just a space for two people. It was a place of growth, understanding, and love, where complicated emotions could coexist with deep bonds. She watched Daniel move around, checking quietly that everything Emily needed was taken care of, and felt a wave of appreciation that made her eyes sting. The realization came slowly but clearly. True love didn't falter when tested, it adapted, it strengthened. It created room for others without losing itself. Sarah understood that the days ahead would still carry challenges, that Emily's healing was ongoing, and that life in their little household would continue to shift in unexpected ways. But for the first time since her sister arrived, Sarah felt a deep, unshakable confidence that they could handle it together. She leaned into Daniel, holding him close as the rain continued outside, and felt the pulse of their connection, the kind of quiet, enduring love that could weather storms, heal wounds, and create a home full of warmth, trust, and care. And even as the night stretched on, She knew this was only the beginning of a journey that would change all of them, weaving their hearts together in ways that were unpredictable, emotional, and profoundly beautiful. And she could feel that whatever came next, they would face it side by side, stronger for the promises kept and the love that guided them through every step.